You're listening to the FairTax for All radio program, where we bring you everything and anything FairTax related. And now, your host, Alex Molesky.
Welcome to the FairTax for All radio show, where our discussion is centered around income taxes, specifically the current U.S. income tax code. Our main goals are to educate and inform in order to eliminate the IRS and our horrendous tax code. Listen in for the next hour, and I'll hopefully entertain you and maybe share something new that you'd like to hear. Before I get into every show, I like to give those of you new to the FairTax a brief intro into it. The FairTax is a bill that eliminates the IRS and it replaces the current tax code with a national sales tax of 23% on new goods and services, not used. No more FICA taxes out of your paychecks. The 23% sales tax collects the tax dollars needed to fund Medicare and Social Security. The FairTax does not eliminate any government plans, just the collection methodology of the taxation dollars. In addition to replacing the income tax, the FairTax also provides each Social Security card holding person a monthly prepaid check to cover the 23% sales tax up to the poverty level. This is not welfare, folks. It is only to ensure we are not taxed on the basic necessities. The FairTax lowers the tax rate for every tax bracket and at the same time helps to address the issue of our growing, unbelievably unsustainable national debt. It is a tax plan that shrinks the size of government and puts every American in a better financial position. You can't lose with it. I want you to go to fairtaxcalculator.org, enter your own numbers to see if you'd be better off under the FairTax. Now, moving on, after our intro there, today on our show, I might be getting a call from a member of Congress, but I won't be holding my breath. I will say wait around until October 14th when the Unfair movie hits theaters around the country and congressional calls will be flying through the lines to get on air and support. I'll talk a little about the movie in just a minute. I want to follow up today to a FairTax and military question I had the other week. Really important question. Also a clip I want to play for you later in the show. And believe it or not, I finally have decided to tackle the FairTax and the Bible. Yeah, I said it. The FairTax and the Bible. Listen in to this show. It should be very interesting. Listen in for the next hour. Soak up some great FairTax info. And after the show, we'll have Dennis Prager with some of his best stuff from last week. First up, let's get started. I have a little surprise for you. I'm excited. I was going to talk a little bit more about the FairTax movie. Well, not the FairTax movie, the movie Unfair, I should say, which is getting released this October 14th before the late filing October 15th deadline. But instead of me telling you about it, why don't I have big-time FairTax activist and the actual producer of this movie coming out tell you about it? I have nationally syndicated radio talk show host Craig Bergman with me to tell you in his words about the movie. Craig, welcome to the show, and please tell us a little bit about this movie, which I know must be a work of love for you.
Well, thank you very much for having me on the show. It is a pleasure to be with you today. And, I don't even know where to start. You mentioned so many different things there. I love talking about the FairTax, so your whole intro has me saying, well, it's not really 23%. It's really more like 15 or 18 once we blah, 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 and I want to jump into that rabbit trail. And then, you're talking about FairTax in the Bible. Well, I'm the evangelical radio talk show host in America, and so I'd love to talk about that. But when we talk about the movie, we thought the IRS has been around for a century of oppression, and there is no one living in America today who was not born under this oppressive system. They don't know any other way of doing business, and we have got to reach the culture in a way that is no longer a bunch of white sheets or tax laws. I mean, the minute you start saying that, people's eyes roll the back of their head and they're gone. So we wanted to do it in the format that everyone else preaches everything they're talking about. We all talk about how Hollywood movies are full of, sex and violence and it's ruining the culture. Well, we want to make movies that are entertaining and have a conservative worldview to them and when people leave the theater, they feel empowered by it to action. And so
Hallelujah.
we put out this movie called Unfair, Exposing the IRS, because when the IRS scandal hit, we said, if anyone does a documentary on this scandal, they're going to do it 2 years from now, looking back at it with a totally different kind of lens than we want to bring to it. So we grabbed the bull by the horns while it was still running across the field and roped it and brought it down. And on October 14th, this is going to be in theaters nationwide. It's what you call a limited nationwide release. So we're in over 670-some theaters and growing. That's a nationwide release. But it's 1 day only, so that makes it a limited release. You know, many of the Hollywood movies with your multi-million-dollar budget, and that includes movies like 2016, Obama's America, you know, the Dinesh D'Souza stuff. It includes the Al Gore movies. It includes Michael Moore. Those were all multi-million-dollar movies.
Let me interrupt you just for 1 second.
Sure.
I have to do this, Craig. You just mentioned 2016, Obama's America. Most people associate that movie with Dinesh D'Souza, but they seem to forget that there was some other guy who was the co-writer, co-director, and actually the producer of that movie. He's the executive director for this movie, right?
That's correct. He's our friend, John Sullivan. John Sullivan is the number one conservative filmmaker in America. He holds the number 2, number 6, and number 8 all-time top-grossing political documentaries, and he is the counter to Michael Moore and Al Gore, who hold pretty much the rest of the top 10. And so he's done 3 movies. He did Expelled with Ben Stein, and then he did Obama's America, and then America with Dinesh D'Souza, and now he's doing Unfair with this little-known talk show host, Craig Bergman. So right. I call myself the mini-me Dinesh D'Souza.
I'm excited about this, and I know you're calling it conservative. I've got to tell you, I'm telling people this is going to have I think it's going to break all records because this is not a conservative matter. Maybe tax reform. I mean, most tax reformists that I know, they're independents. I mean, conservatives, yes, but independents and lots of liberals I know are. I mean, the movie about Unfair, the IRS, and this practice. I can talk to any of my liberal friends. They're not fans of the IRS, so I have a feeling you're going to have a huge audience for this, just like the FairTax is a huge audience for everybody.
I totally hope you're right, and that's why, you know, we say in the movie very early on, this isn't just about the Tea Party. This isn't just about conservative groups. They targeted Jewish groups, okay, and that demographic mostly votes Democrat. They targeted adopted couples, completely unpolitical, and they targeted our veterans. So, you know, these abuses go through all administrations and back 100 years. So you're right. The scandal is completely nonpartisan, but from a conservative point of view, I think we pretty much have the answers. You know, many years ago when I was part of this movement, there were a number of Democrat co-sponsors. But in 2006, when Nancy Pelosi took over the Congress, she said any Democrat that wants to support the FairTax won't get a seat on any committee.
It's just ridiculous. You know what it says to me? The FairTax is only 123 pages, and most of it is just a little bit of legalese in it. It's really, you could understand the FairTax if you just read 10 pages. And you know what scares me? Isn't she the one who said just read it after it's passed? I mean, this is ridiculous.
To know what's in it, it's got 73,000 pages. It's 8 times bigger than the Bible. It's ridiculous.
This is, I mean, in the FairTax, in my mind, I mean, it might be the only tax bill that I've seen which does not raise taxes on any income bracket, and I think it's a conservatives and a liberal's dream in the fact that it shrinks the size of government, which most conservatives and libertarians love, and it's progressive in the sense that it treats everybody fairly, and everybody is financially in a better position, from the poorest all the way to the richest. And trust me, it does help the poor, and it's not welfare either. It's just amazing. But I'm excited about this movie. I mean, and I've told people they can go to your. I want to say this a bunch of times, and they know I had the link up at my website, but it's unfairmovie.com. That's unfairmovie.com. movie.com, UNFAIR movie.com. It's so many sites. I mean, I know you're working on your engines right now, getting it up to show where all they are. I mean, I went to Fandango and just typed in Scottsdale, Arizona in my area, and 4 theaters showed up. I think most every AMC movie theater is going to be carrying it, right?
Every AMC, every Regal, every Cinemark, every Marcus. 700 theaters is quite a lot when we only have 50 states and a few hundred major cities in America. But I want to make a point on the liberal, progressive, and the prebate. One of the things we took on in this movie was the prebate issue and explaining it using economist Louis Woodhill and how he envisions the prebate being used as a credit and opportunity rather than as welfare. And I think that's great language that we need to adopt. And so we put that in the film because many of the people in our early screening said, what's the fair tax? And, you know, you got a limited time on the screen. So like you said, you got to put it in 10 pages. Well, we did it in about 6 minutes.
Okay. Wow. And that's important. You have to get it out there so people know what you're talking about, because I can still tell you how many people get confused between a fair tax and a flat tax. And it's important to explain when you put in the prebates, when you talk about hidden taxes inside of the regular income tax like FICA. I mean, somebody sums up with a 10% flat tax and says, oh, it's a better deal than the 23% fair tax. No, it's not.
Yeah, it's not apples.
It's a high. You end up paying more taxes under a flat tax than you do under the fair tax because, you know, as I said probably about 100 times on my show already, we shouldn't be taxed on the fruits of our labor. You know, Benjamin Franklin said it.
There you're going down your Bible path. But I would say this. I say I don't care if the tax is flat, wavy, glows in the dark. If it violates your First, Fourth, Fifth, Seventh, and Eighth Amendment rights, it's got to go.
Quite correct. I'm going to be talking about that later in the show. I don't know if I'm going to be able to keep you along with me for that one. I'm afraid to keep you along with me on that one. I did get good research on that one, just so you know. I went to SaveAmericaNow.us, and they had some great information up there, which I'll be sharing with everybody later in the show. Right now, we're going to have to go to a break in just a second. Is there any chance, Craig, that I can have you stay with me just for a couple more minutes after this?
Oh, absolutely, because I want to tell people how they can sponsor a theater and we can get more than 600 showings.
Great. Okay, folks, we're going to take a break right now. I'll be right back with Craig Bergman and talk more about Unfair, the movie, coming to theaters soon. Welcome back to the Fair Tax for All radio program. I'm your host, Alex Molesky. With me today, I have Craig Bergman, producer of the upcoming movie Unfair, which is going to be shown at least, as of date, 678 theaters, and we're still 7.5 weeks out, or 7 weeks out. We could well have over 1,000 theaters showing this great movie, which I am so excited about before movie time comes. Craig, thank you again so much for being here.
It has been my pleasure, and I'd like to tell people how we can definitely get 1,000 or 2,000 screens showing of this. The 678 number is physical theaters. That's brick-and-mortar buildings, but most of them go by the name of Cinema 16 or Cinema 12 or whatever, and that means they've got 12 screens or 16 screens. And one of the reasons we bought a Tuesday night is Tuesday is the deadest night for the movie theaters. Tuesday nights when they give away their $1 popcorn that they normally charge $8 for. And so how this works is groups, individuals, businesses, or even candidates for office can go to unfairmovie.com, click on Sponsor a Theater, it's a big button on the bottom there, and they can buy out a whole theater, all 200 seats, all 180 seats. They're all different in the different markets. But they can buy out the whole theater, and then they can, if they're a group, they can give away the tickets to people. They can give away the tickets with the promise of, hey, I'm going to give you a free ticket, but you got to bring a friend who buys one so you can double up get the word out, educate people, motivate people. You can buy out a theater and then subsidize it and say all the members of our church can go for $5 or $10, and then you get some of your money back. If you're a candidate for office in your district, you can buy out a theater. You get to talk at the end of the movie, say whatever you want to say, vote for me for dog catcher or councilman or Senate or Congress or whatever. You can do it as a fundraiser. You can say, I have 200 tickets, but they're $50 a piece, and raise the much-needed funds for your campaign that you have. We're willing to work with any of the groups, any of the candidates who support our vision, who support the fair tax, who support abolishing the IRS. And, of course, you can go to Fandango or any place like that and buy your tickets 2 or 3 or 4 at a time and go see the movie as an individual. But what we want to get is we're looking for those sponsors who can say, our church is going to buy this, our Tea Party group is going to buy this, our Fair Tax group, our Tea Party group, our Liberty group, my business. I want to talk to people because I'm a new dentist in town, and I want customers. I'm a candidate for, state senate in this district, and I want to know who the 200 most activist people are, and I'm going to do a fundraiser here at this because I've got a captive audience. So that's the whole thing. This is way more than just a movie.
It's about change. It's about tax change. That's amazing. I know I'm planning a group, and I might have to sponsor a theater out here in my area. I know if you're listening and you ever, I'm probably going to have to go on AMC's Desert Ridge Theater out here. It's going to be one night only, right? 7 p.m. is the estimated showing time, approximate, or no?
Yes, it'll start about 6:30 with the pre-show, and then the movie begins promptly at 7. At 8:30, the movie ends, and then we have a half-hour live panel discussion, which will be featuring Mike Huckabee and several other notables. We're still working out all the details on them. We'll be filming that before a live studio audience in about 3 weeks on the 15th of September in Washington, D.C., and then it will be in the movie and in the DVD. And we look at it this way. Most conservative films, or even the liberal ones that are political, the documentary type, they're scary films. They say the environment will ruin the world, or Obama is bad, or whatever. And then that's it. You leave the theater real depressed going, now what? Well, we're going to answer the now what question in the theater. We're going to say, these are the people you can get hooked up with. If you're a sponsor, you can be right down there and say, the now what is vote for me, or the now what is join our 912 group, or the now what is get involved with Fair Tax, sign up here. So it's a call to arms, and we're allowing all these local groups or candidates to use our movie to promote themselves.
That's outstanding. And as you mentioned, some of these movies, these documentaries, I mean, you can watch a movie about global warming and maybe half the people leave the theater saying, that's a bunch of malarkey, and half of them say, oh my gosh, the sky is falling. And maybe it is. When it comes to the IRS and the abuses, people have to realize that it absolutely is an abuse of power. And it's only 100 years old. I'm always mystified. People say, well, how could we ever change the tax code? 100 years isn't even in the scheme of mankind. The scheme of our country. I mean, it's a blink. It's nothing.
Look at the scheme of the world. Okay, the income tax is the modern invention. Sales taxes were the only way people could collect taxes before, because you knew a merchant was in your walled city conducting business. You could count his chickens when he walked through the gate. You could count how many chickens he went home with, and you could tax him. There was no income tax until Karl Marx in the late 1800s, and then for the last 100 years after our Supreme Court struck it down and they passed the constitutional amendment. So it's the income tax that's the new idea. It's the income tax that's the corruption and the perversion, and it has to go.
Absolutely, absolutely. And folks, I know I mentioned the website before. It is unfairmovie.com. That's unfairmovie.com. I want you to go there and check out things. If there's the only key thing about Fandango, which I like, is if you're not sure which theater you want to go to, it'll list all the theaters in your area. And I just typed in Scottsdale, Arizona. 4 came up. I typed in Las Vegas, Nevada, because there was a small chance I might be there, and a whole ton showed up. So I mean, you can go there to check it out, but I would definitely go to unfairmovie.com. And as Craig has mentioned, politicians, business owners, groups that are for tax reform, look into sponsoring. And if you're a smaller, like say Tea Party group or tax reform group, I know you have networks. Network with your other groups and get together with that.
And don't forget the church group. I mean, the IRS. Harry Reid was on the floor of the United States Senate just a couple weeks ago saying, all right, if these churches are going to get political, maybe we need to have a constitutional amendment to change the First Amendment. Folks, if that doesn't send a chill up your spine, I don't know what will. So religious liberty is at stake here, too. This system has got to go, and our enemies are not ashamed of what they've done. They're doubling down. And if we don't stand up, if we don't rise up, we will be slaves.
Absolutely. Craig, I want to thank you so much for joining me here today on the show. I know you are extremely busy making the circuit out there right now, talk show, major networks and everything. Thank you. Thank you for putting your time and effort and blood, sweat, and tears into this effort. I am so excited to see this movie. Only less than 7.5 weeks, whatever it is. But anyway, October 14th, and thank you so much for coming on.
It's been my pleasure, and thank you for all you do to keep awareness out there, and enjoy the rest of your great show.
Thank you very much, Craig. Thank you very much. Hey, folks, there's no, you said Tuesday, October 14th. Well, there's also a reason for that date also, because the following morning, that's when late filers are. That's my second least favorite day of the year, October 15th after April 15th, in my FairTax world. Anyway, we're going to take another break right now, folks. We're going to be right back after these break messages, and something more to talk about here on the FairTax. Welcome back to the FairTax for All radio show. I'm your host, Alex Molesky, where we talk about fair tax, anything and everything fair tax. We just had Craig Bergman, producer of The Unfair Movie, which centers around the IRS and the fair tax, coming out nationwide on October 14th. I hope you all join us. I did promise at the beginning of the show I wanted to get to a fair tax and the military pay question. Question I had very recently after a show I did back in December, I think, was you talked about the military and how the fair tax doesn't hurt military families, but actually helps them pretty much like everybody else. I have a two-part question for you, Alex. I understand under our regularly taxed military pay, we pay the same tax rates as everybody else. But could you explain in more details in regards to, one, combat pay, where we don't pay income taxes, and two, our military stores, commissaries, whatever he wrote on the, I call them military stores, where we don't pay sales tax. I don't think the fair tax will help us out and will actually hurt us. Good question. First, let me say thank you for your questions. Thank you for your service. I cannot state this enough. Without you, I am not here exercising my freedom of speech, and I love to talk. The sacrifices of the men and women of our military are not lost on me at all. Now, my answer is yes, military members do pay federal taxes. They pay Social Security and Medicare on all of their pay, including combat pay. The only time they are exempt from paying taxes is they are in an area that is considered a combat zone by the military. They still have to pay the FICA taxes. Personally, I think that is a small consolation for the risks our men and women of the armed forces take on in defending us and our rights. Okay, now let me try to answer this, but let me answer it twice. My first answer is the short answer. It's the answer our national presence has taken on the fair tax as a whole, and it is a reminder of what the fair tax bill is all about. The fair tax at heart is a replacement system of how the government collects taxes to pay for things. The fair tax does not dictate what programs the government pays for or how much. The fair tax acknowledges that there are several sections of the U.S. tax code that reward things most Americans support. We fully expect the U.S. government to continue to support these kinds of things under the fair tax, just not using the federal tax code to administer them. Never again should collection of taxes be mixed with Congress rewarding or punishing behavior. And that's what it does now. Now, combat pay is one of the rules that I believe a majority of our country supports. So I can't see it going away with the fair tax. Again, Fair Tax National, myself, and others fully expect the government to make sure our military personnel get at least the same, if not more, under the fair tax. In fact, my national contact said in case of military combat pay, it just makes perfect sense to just increase combat pay by 23%. There. Simple solution. Not taxing that pay directly costs the federal government. So they should make that transition immediately if they had. It's cheaper for them. Now, my second answer is actually my solution. Let's just say everything plays out as I said above, okay? Here are the numbers. I know on all pay, even combat pay, there is tax paid. It's 7.65% on wages for the FICA tax of Social Security and Medicare on combat pay. Under the fair tax, that pay wouldn't get taxed, that 7.65%. I'm not going to argue the 7.65% matching the government makes to match the FICA payment since it's paid out of all of our tax dollars, including the military personnel anyway. So that leaves 15.35% unaccounted for, or 15.35% that the armed forces would lose from the fair tax if you are comparing regular wages to the combat wages. So I said the simple solution would have been combat pay to be raised by 23% and then take out the 7.65% FICA. You know what? I'm going to go better back. I'm going to go back to national. I don't like that. Just bump the pay 23%. How's that? That way you don't have to confuse and say, hey, maybe, no. We know there's estimates. We know there's numbers done where actually fair tax prices will go up a whole lot less and taxes will be less. Let's not mix and mesh. Let's just raise combat pay 23%, and there you cover all the taxes that would be paid on those earnings. Perfect, right? This is the main part of the question, but there's a second part. The military guy and the guy working at the bank had the exact same advantages, or I should say, the same take-home pay with nothing taken out. But combat pay is increased to offset the sales tax, the combat pay that would pay for new goods and services. So since we were giving the 22% raise, if you had to pay taxes at the commissary, your military store, you already were paying a lot less, right? At those stores, you're just going to have to pay the 22% sales tax, just like the guy paying at the grocery store is now going to have to pay a 22% sales tax. Your prices at the military store are still dramatically lower, and your take-home pay is greater. Trust me, you'd rather go into the fair tax. I'm going to probably continue this on in the next segment because I'm running out of time and I've got to go to break. Welcome back to the Fair Tax for All radio show. I'm your host, Alex Molesky. We've been talking about the fair tax and combat pay in the military. And I had a question if somebody was concerned, won't combat pay, which is not taxed, be a penalty under the fair tax since you're now going to be taxed on all the new goods and services that you buy? You know what? Theoretically, you're right. And we answer this by a simple solution. We're the methodology of collection. We're not the rules of the other laws or the government plans. So you know what? The military, simple solution. And we've mentioned that to people in fair tax before. Just took national to remind me, we would just raise combat pay by 23%. Problem solved. So as far as now having to pay sales tax in the military stores where you don't pay federal tax now, sales tax, they're going to be just like all stores. You don't pay federal sales tax now, whether you're on a base or at a public grocery store, but you would under the fair tax. Since we already said it's just the replacement method, you'll be fine. You'll be taking home more money under the fair tax, and under our idea of just raising combat pay, you'll be much better off. Okay, I really appreciate your question, and again, once again, your service. I'm not here without you. I do not take that lightly. I love this country. I'm going to tackle a subject matter that I have not gone after yet, and this is a funny one. Not a funny one, but it's about religion and how it relates to the fair tax. Full disclosure, I'm about as weak a student of religion as there may be, but I can read and I can deduce from the Bible with lots of help from a great article posted at saveamericanow.us. And they talk about the Bible and what it really says about taxes and where it is in the scripture. We shall see that income tax comes from a heathen origin, they say, but first, a little Bible background. What does the Bible really say, and where is it in the scripture? Income taxes began as a heathen practice. According to the article I'm sharing, they say, I have no reason to believe the scriptures shared are not in the Bible. Neither God nor the Bible approve of income taxes. As a matter of fact, we discover that God warns that a departing from his ways will result in a national income tax being forced upon citizenship. Not only does God warn about taxes, the wrongful taking of personal property, but God warns that the government will become enlarged beyond necessity, employing a great percentage of the population, which the government will have to pay with confiscated dollars. Okay, confiscated dollars. Here are the Bible facts, folks. Israel, the great political and national experiment of the day, had been prospering under a system of government unlike any other, a system of personal liberty and freedom that included the absence of a king and any would-be king's overbearing rulership and despotism of the people. Not only that, but with a system of limited government, in fact, hardly any government at all. The secret to such a system was self-government, self-control, and self-restraint, where each person held himself personally responsible to God to follow the basics set forth by him, and then thereafter free to pursue one's own course. Sound familiar, folks? It should. It is the model that the founding fathers of America sought to replicate. I can't argue with a lot of this right now. A little more background is necessary. The Israelis had been a minority group living in Egypt. They had done well in the free markets and business systems such as it was. And Israel dwelt in the land of Egypt, in the country of Goshen. And they had possessions therein and grew and multiplied exceedingly. Here is another description of what happens to those who follow principle. And the children of Israel were fruitful and increased abundantly and multiplied and waxed exceedingly mighty, and the land was filled with them. Then government stepped in. Watch out, Israel. Governments always tend to be oppressive. They think the people exist for them instead of the other way around. Instead of the Bible concept that the governments exist only to serve the people. Hear this. Now there arose up a new king over Egypt, and he said unto his people, Behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Come on, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply. Therefore, they did set over them taskmakers, taskmasters, to afflict them with their burdens. That was a quote from Exodus. They were taxed, they were enslaved, and the government medical services were instructed to let their sons die at birth. To make the long story short, Moses led the exodus of the people into their own land. And now, many years later, these same people want to forsake the ways of liberty to get themselves a government. This is what they said. Now make us a king to judge us like all the nations. They wanted to forsake the great experiment in which each was accountable to God to govern himself. They wanted a government between themselves and God. The shocking discovery is that God often lets us have what we ask for. God told Samuel to let them have what they asked for, but also warn them about the government. And the Lord said unto Samuel, Hearken unto the voice of the people, and all they say unto thee. For they have not rejected thee, but they have rejected me, that I should not reign over them. That we may also be like all the nations, was their cry. America was intended to lead other nations, not follow them. Our founding fathers envisioned an America, the great experiment, a nation where people would follow God in his ways, govern themselves, and then live in liberty. Yet the cry in America, even by the Supreme Court of the land, is pleading for us to be like other nations, depart from our Constitution, depart from the original intent of the Constitution and its founders. Let's follow European courts. Let's follow the United Nations. Folks, I got to stop just for a second there. You don't have to be religious, or a student of the Bible to understand the logic of our founding fathers. They were basing it upon the Bible. They were basing it upon history. There's so many failed governments, and they were trying to make a good government, which prospered for 150 years. And the income tax and the taxation system, as it says in the Bible. Wow, I'm getting educated as I read along. Anyway, however, God did not concede out of bitterness to the whim of the Democratic voice. He warned them what government would do when they were asking for this change. Now, therefore, hearken unto their voice, howbeit yet protest solemnly unto them, and shew them the manner of the king that shall reign over them. Again, just great information. And you don't have to be a student or even follower of the Bible to see the value and correlation of government 2,000 years ago and today. It's just a great piece of work that I stumbled upon, folks. Moving on in this piece from this website, there were the 3 warnings about God and warnings of God about government, of income taxes, big government, and enslavement. And here's just a sample of his warnings that were posted. And he will take your fields and your vineyards and your olive yards, even the best of them, and give them to his servants. Sounds like reappropriation of funds. Here's a second one. And he will take the 10th of your seed and of your vineyards and give to his officers and to his servants. And he will take your men servants and your maid servants and your goodliest young men and your asses and put them to his work. So basically it's compensation, taxes. He will take the 10th of your sheep and shall be his servants. I don't know. It just sounds like a bunch of take, and redistribution, folks. I'm done for the day with my sharing of biblical findings of income tax and why the fair tax is in line with, the Bible's teachings. I'm going to post this transcript from my website for those of you that want the reference to all the quotes and from the scriptures and any mispronunciations that I've made. I would also like to have you listening in now on the show, those of you, and I know I tell you to visit my website for more information. Do it if you want to get involved. I have links to everything FairTax on my site. Just visit fairtax.org, or you can go to Meluskey.com, my website, MELUSKEY.com. Now, the site where I found this great information also said this. You know what? Just read the Fair Tax book. The Fair Tax book. Do not judge this matter without being fully informed. You will hear many opinions floating around. How will you know the truth? Get the facts yourself. Anything less than doing diligence is an unbiblical behavior and a shame on you. And they quote here from Proverbs, he that answereth a matter before he heareth it, it is folly and shame unto him. The poster of my educational material challenged Bible-believing Christians to not take this lightly. He challenged them to stir yourself up. See, this is a biblical mission. Buy the book and read it until you understand it. Go to fairtax.org, then do something about it. Sign up as a volunteer, get your pastor to read and understand the book. His 501(c)(3) status is safe. This is not a partisan issue. This is a moral issue. This is a biblical issue. I appreciate the information. I have never tried to correlate the Bible and the fair tax, and I must say it's enlightening. I mean, books written quite a long time ago, and they're concerned about it. Anyway, I've got to move on to my next topic. I really appreciate that. I wanted to bring up that this week, Tuesday, in Arizona is primary week of this upcoming week. August 26th is the day you need to get out and vote in the primary. That's just 3 days away now, folks. If you are a registered voter, please get out to vote and make your voice count. If you don't make the effort, then you don't have the right to complain if you're not happy with the people that get elected. I'm sorry, or at least it's not going to hold much weight. In Arizona, there are plenty of positions, important positions that need to get filled, and there are plenty of candidates that are better than others. For governor, we have multiple candidates on the Republican side in the primary. I've already picked my candidate, and while tax plans definitely weighed in my decision, that was not the only criteria for my choice. My suggestion to anybody, and you've heard me say it here before, wanting to learn about a candidate, is to ignore the commercials, ignore the mailings, and go to the candidates' websites to find their stances on what is important to you. If it's empty promises, meaning just talk with no real plan, I'd suggest moving on to another candidate. I can tell you I'm going to be a heavyweight champion of the world, but unless I tell you how I'm going to do it, then you shouldn't listen to a word I say. Plus, I'm going to tell you, I'm at least 20 years past that point. Anyway, you need to know my credentials and stats, plans to do it, etc. If I said I'd plan on training once a week for 10 minutes and living on potato chips and cake, I'm slow, I'm weak, then I'd take a pass on thinking me about heavyweight champion. Let's be honest. I've got a thick head and I'm of heavyweight size. It's about all I have going for me to get a belt. Seriously, see if they have a plan or not on their websites. For the gubernatorial tax plans, I've worked with FairTax representatives from other states with no idea who the candidates are, and they graded the candidates solely on their tax plans. I'll give you the basic grades now because I've already done them before, but you can visit my website again, Molesky.com, and check on the tab Others for the full report. And I'll explain in more detail as to the candidates' plans. So here, real briefly from top to bottom, Ken Bennett got an A, Barry Hess gets a B, Riggs, I think he gets a B or B minus. No, Riggs got a C minus, I'm sorry. Ducey got the C, Riggs got the C minus. Fred Duvall, Christine Jones, Scott Smith, and Andrew Thomas all got the Ds, mostly because they might have promised some things, but they didn't say a single thing of how to do it. And they weren't, fair tax, somewhat related. The bottom line is we base this on a consumption-based tax plan. Only Bennett and Hess were completely clear on their plans. Bennett wants to follow Texas, Florida, Nevada, and other states with sales tax replacing the income tax. I've talked about it on the show before, but the states with no income tax like those, and like Bennett proposes here in Arizona, have the least amount of tax burden on their citizens on the state level. To me, it's a no-brainer, folks. 50 states, and the best states to live in tax-wise are those without an income tax. Arizona is an ideal candidate with two of the top destination locations here in the U.S., the Grand Canyon and Sedona in the top 20. Hess did call for eliminating income tax, replacing with a sales tax, but he only got a B because there were some business things involved. Ducey and Riggs called for a reduction of taxes, but there's no concrete plan. And the others, as I said, they want to grow the economy and stuff, but they really didn't have much on it. If you want to see their tax grades in full, go to Molesky.com again. I want to thank Craig Bergman again for joining me today. I want to thank Jeremy in the booth over there. Have a good weekend, my man. And everybody out there, too. We'll be back next week.